I'll call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee this day, November 27, 2018. I'm Councilman Reich. I chair the committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues, both Council Members Johnson, Palmisano, Bender, and Fletcher. We're also joined by Councilmember Cano. Today's committee. On the agenda today, we have 18 items, including public hearings, consent, and presentation. We will begin with the consent items. Any committee member can pull them for further discussion if they wish. And I'll begin with item 3, which is the rental vehicle insurance policy. Item 4 is the application for the 2018 Minnesota Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Program. Item 5 is the contract with the City of Bloomington for reimbursement of water work by the City of Minneapolis. Item 6 is the contract amendment with Bolton Menk Incorporated for additional professional services at the 4th Street Reconstruction Project. Item 7 is the contract amendment with Engineering and Construction Innovation Incorporated for the 14th Avenue South Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project. Item 8 is the contract amendment with Park Construction Company for the 18th Avenue Northeast Construction Project or Reconstruction Project. Item 9 is the contract amendment with Schaefer Contracting Company Incorporated for the 54th Street West Reconstruction Project. Item 10 is the contract amendment with Metropolitan Council on Environmental Services for Phase 9 of the Interceptor Improvement Project. Item 11 is the right of entry agreement with BAE Systems for environmental monitoring. Item 12 is the land sale portion of the right-of-way adjacent to 177 Glenwood Avenue to Catholic Charities. And we're setting a public hearing for that at January 8th, 2019. Item 13 is the 33rd Street East Reconstruction Project from Hiawatha Avenue to Minnehaha Avenue. That'll be the project layout easements. Item 4 is the Industrial Boulevard Multi-Use Trail between I-35W and Broadway Street Northeast, project layout and easements. Item 15 is the Critical Traffic and Parking Area application, and that's for the area of 10th Avenue South from 21st Street East to 22nd Street East and 21st Street East from 10th Avenue South to 11th Avenue South. Item 16 is the limited use permit with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for pedestrian bike sidewalk facility for 8th Street Southeast with Trunk Highway 35W right-of-way. Item 17 is the Metro Green Line extension, Southwest Light Rail assignment and assumption agreement with the Metropolitan Council. It's always good to see that project continue to move forward. Item 18 is the bid for rental of mortar grade snow removal. Those are all the consent items. Anyone wish to pull anything for further conversation? Seeing none, I'll move all items as submitted. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We've been joined by committee member Councilmember Gordon. Good to see you. We now can go into the public hearing portion of our meeting today. And then let's start with item 1, which is the North Loop Paving Street Reconstruction Project. Approval, assessment, areaway abandonment for that project. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This first item is the project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment for North Loop Paving Street Reconstruction Project. This is managed by Adam Hayo, project manager within the Transportation Engineering and Design Group, who will present additional information on this topic.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Today I'm here presenting for the public hearing for the North Loop Paving Reconstruction Project, City Project number 6766. The proposed project consists of reconstructing 5 streets in the North Loop neighborhood. The entire project proposes to reconstruct approximately 0.8 miles of streets and includes segments of 3rd Street North, 5th Avenue North, 7th Avenue North, 8th Avenue North, and finally 9th Avenue North. The elements proposed to be included as part of this project includes new sidewalks, ADA compliant ramps, intersection bump outs, boulevard with grass, new pavement with curb and gutter, and finally utility improvements. The project will also be salvaging and reusing historic materials in accordance with the Warehouse District Heritage Street Plan. The total project cost is $8.6 million. The total street reconstruction assessment for the North Loop paving project is $1,507,584. This is based on the 29 uniform assessment rates. The rest of the funding sources include cash transfers, net debt bonds, and stormwater revenue. City Council provided layout approval for the North Loop paving project on March 27th, 2018. Prior to layout approval, city staff conducted numerous outreach activities throughout the planning and design of the project. There were 3 public meetings held at the Minneapolis Central Library. Furthermore, city staff conducted individual meetings with numerous property owners and property managers. In advance of today's public hearing, staff also hosted a pre-assessment meeting to provide an overview of the project, discuss planned improvements, and answer any questions related to the assessment method and process. This meeting was held on November 13th. Today, Public Works is asking the City Council to pass resolutions ordering the work to proceed, adopting the special assessments, authorizing the sale of assessment bonds, and authorizing abandonment and removal of areas in conflict with the project. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we've previously looked at this project, it's included portions of 2nd Street and 1st Street and 4th Avenue North. So I'm just wondering, have we split this? Are we taking it in pieces? Have we cut the project back? I know that when we approved it, it included more than just these streets.
With the approved layout, we received back in March, we had those 5 street segments as part of the approval process. I believe you're referring to a separate North Loop PED pedestrian improvement project, which is specifically based on intersection improvements in the same area as well. Or is that?
So we're not discussing any of the pedestrian improvements today. We're only discussing repaving, sort of in a vacuum, and then we do a separate assessment process with a separate public hearing for the pedestrian improvements that have been discussed?
Yeah, today we're here just for the paving reconstruction project. There will be no assessment hearing for the North Loop PED improvement project.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Fletcher, if I might clarify, that project is separate in part because it has federal funding that comes in through it. So it has been on a separate and parallel track. We will be communicating with the neighborhood on a broad variety of improvements. However, this project is tracking through our typical system whereby we will seek layout approval and then follow up with the assessment public hearing, which is today.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions per the presentation? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. And this is for item number 1. Anyone signed in? No one signed in. Anyone wish to come forward? This is a public hearing. Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and move the item before us. Well, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mark Abramovitz. I represent Citadel Investments, LLC, and this is in respect of the property located at 505 North 3rd Street. That is the location of Modish Brewery, and it's at the intersection of 3rd Street North and 5th Avenue. I'm here to make a comment on the special assessment that's being levied against the property for the project. Let me say that I'm not here to speak against the project or the assessment itself. It has to do with the way our property is being assessed, and I'd like to go into a little bit of detail on that.
Please do.
So, as I said, our property is located at 5th and 3rd, and in 2014 and 2015, representatives of Modest Brewery and myself and other members of our company met with CPED because the building at that time was vacant. It had previously been a warehouse, and it was going to be converted into what's now Modest Brewery. We met with them to discuss issues related to getting our building permit, and the issue of the sidewalk along 5th Avenue was brought up. The sidewalk, which is one of the sidewalks to be reconstructed under this project. At that time, in our meetings, we were told that if we redid the sidewalks and made sure that we did them in conformance with the city's new plans, and that we made sure that they fit within the right-of-way for 5th Avenue North, that they would not have to be redone. And what we understood is that we would not be assessed for work that would happen in the near future. When we first learned of the North Loop paving project, we attended meetings with Adam and also Forrest Hardy to understand the project, to also communicate with them what was our understanding of our meetings with CPED as to how our sidewalks would be affected, if at all, and if we would, if we would be subject to special assessments for the work that would be done. And what we understood was that there was no way to be to receive any credit for the work we did. The work that we did that we understood was at the city's behest. And so I've written some letters. I've written letters to Forrest Hardy, who was the transportation planner. I've also spoken with Matt. And what we understand is because it's a uniform assessment, there's no way that we can receive any credit for the work that we did. And so what was curious to us, if we go back in time, is we had sidewalks on 5th Avenue and 3rd Street, which were both in the same condition. They were pretty old, somewhat uneven. We weren't asked to do any work with the sidewalks on 3rd Street, just 5th Avenue. I have a Google Street Maps view, if I may use it.
Certainly.
I'm not quite sure. Okay. So we thought it was odd that we weren't asked to do any work on 3rd Street, but we didn't. We did the work on 5th Street, and if you can see here, here's 5th Avenue. Here's 5th Avenue. This is the new sidewalk, which was put in around October of 2015, and it does kind of curve around to 3rd Street. I've spoken to Adam. I spoke to Adam last night, and I asked him, based on the finalized plans for this project, what, if anything, will happen to our sidewalk on 5th Avenue. And what I understand is there's going to be a bump out so that there's a larger sidewalk, and it's for pedestrian safety, and that they will tie back in. But the long and the short of it is other than taking out perhaps this panel here of the sidewalk by the fire hydrant and here so that they can tie in the bump out, our sidewalk is not going to be touched. And so we understood that we would basically have that we wouldn't be assessed, or perhaps it's naive of me, but we understood that the work that we did for the city, and was only 3 years ago, would be left untouched, which it is. And my understanding is that there's no way to receive any credit through the special assessment. And when I've talked to people, they say it just can't be done, or you're opening up a Pandora's box. And so maybe the box can't be opened, but maybe the lid needs to be cracked. I understand that the letters and the emails that I've sent have been sent to the clerk, and so that my right to appeal the assessment through the courts is preserved. I've been to court on different issues. It's not an easy thing to do. It's very expensive. I don't know this process, but I have been to court for contracts. And so I wanted to just bring this to your attention, and if there's nothing that can be done, so be it. But perhaps this is something that needs to be looked at, and when property owners, and not all property owners in the North Loop are big developers, many people are small businessmen like myself. I mean, this property's been in my family since 1968, and so the neighborhood was a lot different then. But maybe something needs to be done so that these issues don't happen again, because the investment that we made in the sidewalk was an investment that we could have made in our new tenant. It was money that we wouldn't have had to borrow had we been given the opportunity to perhaps make some changes to the grade or to fix the curbing, which was in pretty poor condition at that time. We met with the city. We would have been in a different situation, and we would have had maybe an option that we didn't have. So this is what I wanted to say, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and I thank you for this time.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come forward on this matter? If not, maybe staff can comment on the assessment process and maybe some clarity, given that we do have two projects with two funding tracks, as noted in Councilmember Fletcher's earlier inquiry. Is that playing a factor in this sort of situation with the constituent? Anyone, project person, come forward and make a comment, or the assessment person?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Don Elwood, Director of Transportation Engineering Design. First question is the assessment. We're here today for an assessment public hearing. The property owner has preserved their right to appeal, and I want you to understand we are still working with that property owner to find out what we can do that's consistent and uniform. Because the assessment to the property is for the entire project, maybe not just a section of curb and gutter or a section of sidewalk. So I want to make sure that what we do is consistent across the city, and we're more than willing to work with this property owner to see if we can come up with a solution that works.
I would encourage to continue that process in earnest.
Absolutely. Number two is with the North Loop Pedestrian Improvement Project. That is a federal project that's coming through to do spot location intersection improvements. Could be bump outs, could be signal systems. That is a federal project that is separate. Running concurrently with this will be done at the same time as this, but it's a separate project. The assessments for those typically are not done because they're just spot intersection improvements that are doing signal systems and other upgrades for safety, and it's federally funded.
Fair enough. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Fletcher?
I guess more of a comment, and this might be a more of a general issue, that we've got to get better at coordinating our street work with development. We've got to get better at coordinating so that when somebody is making improvements as they do a construction project, as they make these kind of improvements, that it is getting factored into our other projects, and these things are getting sequenced and timed out so that we're not duplicating projects. This just feels like, I mean, he just put in this curb, now we're going to rip it up and put in another one, and I think this is a little bit, this is happening a little too much. So I really want to see us make some changes and improve our capacity to coordinate the work that property owners are doing, so that we're asking them to make the improvements that we're planning to make anyway, so that we can create some efficiencies, not be having curbs installed only to rip them up and reassess. I'm pretty frustrated. I think we can hear that the property owner is pretty frustrated. I think this is something that we're, as we're taking on a lot of development, this is something that we've really got to build our capacity for. So I'll be working on that. I'll look forward to working with all of you on that, both in the case of the specific property owner, but more generally for our city. This is something that we got to get better at.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you. I was just a little bit curious about changing the assessment amount, changing the uniform assessment. We heard from the person who testified saying that that really can't be done. It's hard for me to believe that it couldn't be done, and so I'm curious, is that something that the council has the authority to do, or is that something that can be negotiated with staff? Where does that decision point actually lie? I understand it might be something we don't want to do very often. Obviously, we set the policy of having a uniform assessment so it was clean and it was simple and it was clear and everybody knows what they're getting into. But I suspect there's some authority we have somewhere so that we can deal with problems that get like this and with development projects that come up. And I'm hoping that that authority lies with the council, but maybe we're going to say it doesn't. We have to go to court about it. But maybe you can help me understand.
Director, here's our lawyer. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, the uniformity requirement that Mr. Elwood mentioned is a legal requirement for all assessments. So the point being made is that if we were to change the approach to one property, we'd have to change it for all of them, benefiting from the same improvement. So it would require taking a major step back and looking at the rate.
And if I may add, just within those parameters, because there's a unique situation with a certain aspect of the project, I think there's some administrative wiggle room that they're exploring because of that unique contribution at a previous work done within the overall project. I guess that's what's being explored. But broaching the legal framework of a uniform assessment is wrought with specific and universal problems.
It sounds like it. So who's legal? What authority put that legal framework in place? Is that a city law, or is that a state law, or a federal law?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, it's based on common law, so a law generated by court cases. The council does have influence on that rate when it's adopted, I think at the beginning of each year or the very end of the previous year. The uniform assessment rate.
Correct. Well, maybe we should look at what kind of resolution and action we took to adopt that and make sure that we wrote some flexibility into that so that there would be some way for us to count. I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but I'd actually be more comfortable if the council was involved in the wiggle room too, so that, I mean, I appreciate that. It sounds like maybe what we'll come up with is some idea like, I guess the whole cost of the project is a little bit less because this sidewalk was put in, so now everybody's assessment's going to go down a little bit, or something like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of what creative gymnastics we're going to go through to make it all fit together. And so we can look back on the resolution where we set that uniform assessment rate, and I'm fully supportive of us doing it that way, setting it once a year and coming up with that. But you can.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, I don't want to create a misconception here. The council does have the authority to override the uniform assessment rate, but in this situation, it would require taking a step back and looking at the whole project.
Thanks. That's, I guess, exactly mostly the clarity I was looking for. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Fletcher.
So given that it doesn't seem like it makes sense for us to do that, what is the proposed remedy here? Or is there none? Are we being asked to vote on this and just say that property owner's out of luck?
I believe staff had indicated that because there was an incremental investment, that's being explored as something that could be.
And can you explain what that means?
It means, well, staff, you come forward. I won't have to speak for you, but I think I know where they're going with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me maybe clarify the process I've followed on all capital projects. The property owner preserves their right to appeal. That property owner will then appeal, and then we look for irregularities. And during that appeals process, we try to reach a resolution. Council does approve whatever we come up with. So ultimately, it does come back to council to approve if there's any adjustments to the individual assessments based on irregularities in the court process. Hopefully that helps clarify, but it's through that process by which we get to a solution, which is the very process we have in place.
Councilmember Fletcher.
So we are talking about courts as the remedy now. There's not actually some sort of a staff process or remedy. There's no wiggle room. It's just that the courts might tell us to do something different at this point.
That may be Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, that may be a technical question that I'll ask our attorney on. Is it actually through court, or it's the process by which you appeal your assessments? Does it actually go to a courtroom, or how that process works legally, the legal terms? That I'm a little out of my area of expertise.
So referring back to a legal counsel.
Councilmember Fletcher, would you mind repeating your question again?
Sure. So the implication from the comments earlier was that there's some wiggle room and we're trying to work something out. And I'm trying to understand, if I'm being asked to approve something today, are we in fact trying to work something out? Is there room, or is Mr. Elwood's answer the correct one, that they can appeal, and that then like they have a right to take us to court to say this isn't right? So are we kicking this to the courts and putting him through a legal process? Is this something, I'm just trying to understand what is actually the process here, and is there actually some remedy for this property owner, or are we approving this with the full assessment for a property owner who thought that he was building something to what we needed? I just want to understand what's happening.
So the answer to that question is both of those are a possibility. So staff does have the ability to go back and adjust the uniform assessment rate in the situation or some other aspect of the assessment on a uniform basis for all properties. Or if the result doesn't satisfy the property owner, he does still have the right to appeal to district court.
Councilmember Fletcher.
I guess my other question would be, is there a time sensitivity to passing this today, or could we kick this to next cycle so that I have a chance to learn more about this process offline? Because I really don't feel like there's something that doesn't feel right about the way this is being treated, and I'm wanting to learn more about it before we vote to approve, if it's possible.
How about we approve without recommendation, subject to that inquiry offline?
Okay, that'll work. Thanks. I'll make that motion.
Councilmember Fletcher has made the motion to approve without a recommendation, noting that there will be inquiries as to how to resolve the matter that was presented before us. Any further conversation? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. 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 Dissenting nay. That moves forward as noted. And then we go to item 2, the 8th Street South, Hennepin Avenue to Chicago Avenue Street Reconstruction Project, project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'll introduce again Adam Hale, Project Manager for the 8th Street South Reconstruction Project. This is approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment in preparation for a major downtown reconstruction beginning next construction season.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm here today again to present for the public hearing for the 8th Street South Reconstruction Project, City Project number 2287. The proposed project consists of reconstructing the 8th Street South between Hennepin Avenue and Chicago Avenue. The elements proposed to be included as part of the project includes new sidewalks, ADA compliant ramps, new pavement with curb and gutter, and utility improvements. The project will also include streetscaping, curb bump outs, pedestrian level street lighting, signal improvements, new signage, and new pavement markings. The total project cost is $18.5 million. The total street reconstruction assessment for 8th Street is $1,437,043. This is based on the 29 uniform assessment rates. The rest of the funding sources include a federal grant, municipal state aid funds, cash transfers, net debt bonds, and stormwater revenue. The City Council provided layout approval for 8th Street project on March 28, 2017. Prior to layout approval, city staff conducted extensive public outreach activities throughout the planning and design of the project. This included several project open houses and numerous meetings with neighborhood associations, residents, businesses, and other project stakeholders. In advance of today's public hearing, staff hosted a pre-assessment meeting to provide an overview of the project, discuss planned improvements, and answer any questions related to the assessment method and process. This meeting was held on November 14th. Today, Public Works is asking City Council to pass resolutions ordering the work to proceed, adopting the special assessments, authorizing the sale of assessment bonds, and authorizing abandonment and removal of areas in conflict with the project. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions per the staff presentation? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. I've been noted by the clerk that there's no one signed in and no letter submitted. Anyone here present wish to come forward? Anyone here wish to come forward? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name's Mike Noble. I'm the innkeeper at the Normandy Inn at 405 South 8th Street here downtown. I'm very pleased and excited to know about the great improvements coming to 8th Street, and we're definitely all for it. It's going to make the city significantly better, in my opinion. The one thing, though, that I just wanted to express my concern about is the areaway abandonment. And I understand that areaways can present the conflict to the project. And I'm sure have been dealt with extensively throughout the city. But I just wanted to present for your consideration that in addition to a flat-out necessity to abandon all areaways, there are many businesses that have installed sort of critical infrastructure in these areaways, and they've been able to use them kind of freely and openly and freely over decades and decades and decades, and it's been an accepted way of operation. And what I'm just proposing is that there could be an option to total abandonment. Certainly, it is a public right-of-way, but could there be some other options to just abandonment? Could there be areaway fees and annual inspection fees and standards of construction that could be imposed, and people then, property owners, would have the choice. Do I want to spend the money to uphold this, structural, certain conditions of construction that conform with city requirements, and am I willing to pay the annual fee? So can that be an option for property owners that, again, such as ourselves, have had areaways that have been openly and evidently and freely used for decades and decades, and now we to remove them would present a very major cost. Perhaps we'd like to pay a fee and comply with some standards of construction. So thank you for hearing my thought on that.
Oh, very good, thank
Yeah.
you. So in lieu of our process of airway abandonment is the question. Do we have a response to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Elwood, Director of Transportation Engineering Design. I checked with the project manager for that property. That areaway is, at this point, not in conflict with the project. So it will not be deemed to be removed. Today's action sets up the ability that when we encounter during construction an areaway that is in conflict, too high or it's falling apart, it gives us the ability to order the work to have that areaway abandoned. In this particular case, we do not need to do that.
So it's an intervention that's specific to the project and the project duration.
Mr. Chair, that is correct, and we do this on many projects where sometimes we don't know where all the areaways are. We want that ability to keep the project moving, and so we get the authority to order the abandonment of areaways on projects. I checked with the project manager that areaway is not in conflict at this time and can remain in place.
Very good. Well, continue to be in conversation with all people affected by the project. And in terms of your thought-provoking question, I think staff could take that to heart and understand how we can utilize our right-of-way as it's being used by private and public interests throughout our city. With that, I see no other people coming forward to make comment. I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion to approve. So moved. It's been moved. We will now have any discussion if desired by committee members. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting name. That carries, and that concludes our public hearing section, items 1 and 2. We can now move to a discussion section, and this is going to be sort of a continuation of a previous presentation in terms of the operations as proposed for our future water facility. It's really just an operational update. It's been a little bit of time since we had the first one. There have been some modifications to the actual operations, and so a timely update is needed. I will now yield the floor to Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'll introduce this next item, which is an update on the Hiawatha Maintenance Facility Campus Expansion Project. This is an update of the planning activities that have occurred over the last couple of years, specifically related to the Public Works functional needs for the site, which is the topic that is germane to the Transportation and Public Works Committee. This is a receive and file item. Decisions related to property and work that's been led out of Finance and Property Services will be addressed next week through Ways and Means. For today, I'm going to introduce Lisa Cerny, the Deputy Director of Public Works and the City Engineer, to present information related to Public Works functional needs for the site. I want to note that this is a multidisciplinary project and topic, and we have our partners here today, Mark Ruff and Bob Friddle from Finance and Property Services, as well as David Frank. Together, we have been a strong team working with the community, working with the council member of the ward, and presenting information. Today is our opportunity to present that same information that we've been communicating to the community, out to the community, back to our home committee, Transportation and Public Works. And I'll now ask Lisa Cerny to begin her presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Councilmember Cano. My name is Lisa Cerny. I'm the Deputy Director, City Engineer for Public Works. Today, this morning, I'm going to be providing the update on the Hiawatha Maintenance Facility Campus Expansion Project. Several of the topics that I'm going to cover are the purpose and need for the project history, some of the project elements that are being discussed to be part of the project, and then an update on recruitment and training. So first of all, why do we need a new facility? The water distribution team is located at 935 5th Avenue Southeast, commonly known as the Water Yard. That facility is over 100 years old, and over time, we have outgrown that space and are not able to work as productively and as efficiently. You can see in these photos that there are a number of conditions that exist in our facility that are not ideal for our employees. The building is not ADA compliant. There's not a way to get into the building without climbing a flight of steps. Once you're in that building, the only way to get to some of the conference rooms, locker rooms, is by a flight of steps. So that building is not ADA compliant today. Also at the site, we have vehicles that carry tools and equipment to make repairs and improvements on our pipe systems. We have over 1,000 miles of water pipes. Folks there also perform metal fabrication, which is a key component to the parts and pieces of the water system. Those parts and pieces are also stored at the facility in order to allow staff to respond at a moment's notice to water main breaks and or planned work. The water distribution and meter team are a group of people that make sure that over 55 million gallons of drinking water gets from our treatment facility in Fridley to faucets in Minneapolis and 7 other municipalities safely and reliably. The water gets to homes through over 1,000 miles of pipes under our city streets. This group also makes sure that the fire hydrants that you see out in the right-of-way are functioning and operating for fire department to respond in emergency situations as well. Some of the surface water and sewers team are currently located at our Hiawatha facility. Others are located in the City of Lakes building downtown and also the South Transfer Station south of the Hiawatha facility. The goal of this project is to consolidate the majority of the field crews with the designers, the outreach team, and the regulatory oversight group in a single location. Consolidation increases coordination between planning, modeling, regulatory, operations, and capital work. I'm going to shift to the project history. In 1991, a comprehensive facility master plan was completed for all of our facilities citywide. I'm just today going to focus on the Hiawatha facility. The goal of that master plan really focused on growing our facilities and consolidating and leveraging the property that we already owned. The city operated the north half of this site that you see in the graphic. I have a few pictures to share of what the site looked like in the 1990s. At that point in time, the city operated its own concrete and asphalt plant at the Hiawatha campus to support our paving and street operations. You can see conveyor belts, bins used to store aggregates and fly ash and cement, which is the fine material used in making concrete, the mixing chambers to make the final concrete and asphalt products for our roadways. This is just another view. Hiawatha was also home to our bridge and sewer crews, central stores, and the paving lab. Just another view, this is what it looked like from the corner of Hiawatha and 26th. The city decommissioned the concrete plant in the late 90s and the asphalt plant in the early 2000s. Taking that action reduced noise and emissions from the site, and it was done while we were planning the overall facility consolidation for this location. One of the next steps in the project history is in 2001, Council reaffirmed the plan to expand the Hiawatha campus and authorized staff to have discussions for the acquisition of the roof depot that was originally identified in Phase 1. Those conversations in 2001 did not lead to acquisition, and Phase 1 planning continued and was completed in 2010. This is what the facility looks like today. Phase 1 focused on good environmental practices and achieved a Platinum Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED, certification. Reuse of the buildings, tunnels, and other material was an important design and implementation component for the success of the project. The building, for those of you that haven't been down there, the building on the right was repurposed and is currently office space for the facility. The left side of the building is new. That's the locker room, break room, and additional office space. This is just another view from the Sabo Bridge. The team currently at Hiawatha takes pride in working on and maintaining the over 1,000 miles of street, 85 miles of off-street bike lane, 820 miles of sanitary sewers, and 565 miles of stormwater pipes, in addition to being the central location for our street sweep, pothole patching, snow and ice control, and other daily and seasonal activities. The fence that you see in this picture is a buffer and is also a reuse. It was repurposed Lowry bridge decking. Other key pieces to the design of the facility in 2010 and still today are the plantings and art that are around the exterior of the facility. Again, in 2015, campus consolidation was of interest, and staff were directed to negotiate the acquisition of Roof Depot for the Public Works Water and Distribution Group. Elections, property, and evidence were also possible uses at that time. In 2016, the city took ownership of the property. Shortly after the city took ownership, staff started conversations with the community. At our first meeting, community members shared an idea for an engagement process that was followed for another project in this general community. The process that they shared with us identified a smaller group of community members to serve on an advisory committee to inform the design. That discussion led to the formation of the GAC, or the Guideline Advisory Committee, and with the help of NCR, we began that process. Residents applied to NCR and were selected to participate. Staff also attended neighborhood requested meetings and hosted other city-sponsored meetings out in the community. Community engagement has informed the master planning concepts to date and will continue to need to define the details around the green space, the buffer space, and art. Staff recognizes that some community members feel disappointed that options developed do not include 3 acres of community space. Staff and our consultants have spent a significant amount of time reviewing our work process. What square footage do we need? How do we work? Refining our vehicles and equipment inventory. How can we share more? What else can we do? Is technology changing? Are there other locations for us to do that work? All of those things were done to reduce the footprint as much as possible, and we have not found a 3-acre option that works for municipal use. The Public Works facility also provides more than 470 living wage jobs with benefits in the neighborhood, which is part of a racially concentrated area of poverty. Many of these jobs are also green jobs related to the distribution of clean drinking water and focus on preserving the quality of water in our rivers, lakes, and streams. Since 2012, we've hired 179 employees only in the specific work groups that would be located at the Hiawatha campus expansion. These positions range from public works trainees, which are very entry-level positions without a lot of minimum qualifications. That group of folks receives a lot of on-the-job training in order to help them be successful as they grow into other positions at the City of Minneapolis in Public Works. The other end of the spectrum that is part of that 179 are very top-level professional technical positions. The majority are in that service worker level. We have a great staff person that has been able to really focus on getting more people in the city aware of our work and recruiting them to apply. During the month of October, Monique attended roughly 300 different recruiting sessions where she shares information about the work that we do and what people need to do to apply. Sometimes she's even able to get computers to those facilities and help walk people through job applications. One question we often get is that I have a criminal background. Does that take me out of the running? Her response is no, it doesn't. The city is a felony-friendly employer, and we review each individual application and make decisions based on that, and a criminal record is not an automatic no. Moving on to the opportunities that could exist at the Hiawatha facility. We believe the opportunities at Hiawatha make it the best site for public works expansion. Having a single location for our operational teams working in the right-of-way provides great opportunities for communication and coordination of our work for the next 100 years. When staff from different work groups are at a single site, it increases our operational efficiencies by creating opportunities to share equipment and other fleet, especially some of those specialized vehicles or things that are used at peak times by different work groups. It makes it easy to shift staff to the highest priority work. We're doing that today when it comes to snow plowing. It used to be done all in a single group. Today we have multiple groups supporting that. So we shift our priorities. We are able to consolidate and reduce the footprint of material stored. Almost all of the different work groups need to use piles of class 5 or aggregate. We can reduce that footprint when we have multiple people using that at that facility. And also because it's centrally located in the city, there are fewer vehicle miles that would need to be traveled. In addition, within the building, there are opportunities to share locker room space, conference room space, break room space, and then also the repair space for equipment and vehicles. Moving some of our light fleet maintenance work to the site also improve, because we have so many vehicles at the site, it reduces the vehicle miles traveled within the neighborhood and city. Central location is critical to ensure we're able to respond quickly to needs all over the city, day and night. The facility will be safe, accessible, and healthy for employees. And our Public Works campus provides a high number of jobs for an industrial zoned property. I'm going to talk about some of the project elements with pictures. The redevelopment of the southern area provides an opportunity to do the necessary environmental remediation, stormwater management, creation of green space, and buffer for the community. It can also be a great space for public art. This picture is just an example of what could be done along Longfellow and 28th. Public Works also needs to be able to store material. We need space for things like manhole covers. We have over 25,000 manholes in just sewer, sanitary, and stormwater. We need catch basin structures. We need fire hydrants. If a car hits a fire hydrant, we need to be able to have that stuff on hand, go out there, fix it again so that others can respond to emergency situations. We also have thousands of miles of pipe where we need pieces of that on hand so that we can respond to both our planned work and emergency response. We also need covered storage. There's some material and equipment that needs to be covered in order to not blow around or be in a controlled environment, because things like plastic don't last as long when the sun hits them. The project is also looking at having the roofs of the facilities solar ready. Some of the vehicles have more sensitive parts and pieces to them, or they have water on them because they need to measure volumes of water, and so it's important to have them in temperature-controlled areas. The project also plans on incorporating greening and other sustainable stormwater components in the design. These are just examples of ways that can be done. And an improved and consolidated central stores for parts, equipment, tool storage, and circulation is part of the project. Central stores actually supports beyond just Public Works. It supports all of the different material purchases that the city makes. I've already mentioned this, but collaboration across the various different work groups will improve, and we anticipate seeing efficiency in the management of our right-of-way throughout the city. This consolidation does increase the number of employees at the site by over 140 people. This means that there's more staff coming to work. This means that there's more equipment and vehicles at the site. There will be an increase of 97 work vehicles and equipment as a result of the consolidation. Of that, what's important to understand that number includes trailers and things like skid steers. So 1 or 2 people may get in a truck and leave from that site in order to go do their work with 3 pieces of equipment. The consultant completed a traffic study for both the internal circulation of the site as well as the external circulation of the site. The results show a 1.6% of average daily vehicles traveled increase in this area. Most of that is related to employees arriving for work or going home at the end of the day. Impacts can be mitigated by continuing to grow our pipeline of employees from the neighborhood, following the idling policy, distributing start times to reduce the peak, and good site design. When the facility first opened in 2010, we were lining about maybe 1,000 miles of our sanitary pipe. We were doing our CIPP lining for about 2 weeks out of the year. What we have learned is that is a very effective and efficient way to extend the life of our pipe system. So today we are doing that work for almost 7 months out of the year, and we're able to accomplish about a little over 7 miles annually, extending the life of those pipes by 50 years. There's a project element that moves this into a dedicated space for this use. There's also space to test, complete repairs, and perform calibration on water meters. There's over 1,000 water meters at each property throughout the city of Minneapolis, and they are a critical piece of the infrastructure for tracking and billing water usage. Infrastructure will be installed to support the transition of the city's fleet to electric vehicles. We are continually looking for opportunities to green our fleet. Moving on to the Recruitment and Training Center. This graph shows the number of retirements expected in Public Works over the next 10 years. It's somewhat overwhelming to me, and makes it critical to have a plan to provide training for new and existing employees to ensure their success. Right now, we are in the middle of a large hiring process for about 40 Public Works Service Worker trainees, Public Works Service Worker 1s, Public Works Service Worker 2s, Water Service Worker trainees, and Water Service Worker 1s. Most of these positions that we're hiring, these 40 positions, would be located or will report to work groups at the Hiawatha campus. This is the overall diversity of Public Works. We are continuing to work on increasing the diversity of our workforce. Today, 24% of our workforce is comprised of people of color. We are seeing a positive change in our diversity as a result of the recruiting and pathway programs that I've already mentioned. This year alone, Monique attended over 30 recruitment events. More needs to be done to build both our pipeline of employees and diversify our workforce. A training center located in one of the most diverse neighborhoods in Minneapolis increases our opportunity to make connections with the community throughout the year rather than just during the month of October, which is our typical hiring process. A training center would complement our current pathway programs. We have pathway programs for mechanics as well as trainees, and it would allow us to build on the ones we have today. It would increase opportunities for apprenticeship programs and outreach events. Community and labor partners could also recruit from the neighborhood to build their pipeline. Having space to help residents and others understand workforce needs and opportunities is very valuable as they identify jobs as their first job or if they change. I'm going to start at the top. Second floor concept. Through conversations with a variety of different public works staff and other potential partners, we've really identified 3 primary concepts that would be critical at a recruitment and training center. One is the need to provide space for classroom type of space for training so that employees are well informed and able to do their work. Being able to access simulators also helps prepare them for work in the industry. A second key component is to provide technology training. Technology needs are growing rapidly and will continue to change the way we do work. We need to make sure that our employees stay competitive so that we can be effective stewards of the city's infrastructure. And finally, on the first floor is a sandbox or shop area, which would provide hands-on training. This is really key as we bring in a lot of new employees to be able to provide a space for them to touch, feel, move the dirt, so that when they go out and they're working in the right-of-way and we have people walking on sidewalks, riding their bike, rolling, or driving, they're better aware of their surroundings and they can do their job more safely and efficiently. This space could provide training like welding or chainsaw operation, pipe installation, water main repair, small crane operation, or running things like a skid steer or other equipment. This is just a perspective concept of the exterior of the training facility, something that the facility could look like. Public Works has had very positive conversations with local labor organizations, community planning and economic development, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board about concepts of a recruitment and training center. And very quickly, with all of those organizations, we identified a common goal in building the pipeline of our future workforce and retaining the workforce that we have today. There's value for this type of facility, centrally located and accessible by bus, train, bike, or foot. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you for that thorough update. Are there any questions per the presentation and the information there within? Any committee members? Clearly, Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things you mentioned was efficiency of combining the sites and sort of having those together. And I know that people have been raising questions about whether this could be located somewhere else, and I'm trying to understand the actual cost or the actual benefit, if there's a way we can sort of quantify that or understand what it actually means if we were to, and I will admit that I am skeptical of a narrative that suggests that this is such an environmental injustice in Phillips that we must move it to North. I think that that's actually like a little problematic, but if we are going to think about it that way, if we were thinking about a north side location, what's the cost of that in terms of additional pollution, in terms of additional driving miles, in terms of additional time?
Director Hutchinson?
Chair Wright, Councilmember Fletcher, Public Works nor Finance and Property Service have been asked to perform any analysis related to a divided site. Our analysis is related to the consolidation of the site. So while we're not prepared today, we could talk with you offline about your questions.
But I may add that and of course the process since 2001 or even 91 is to have consolidated sites, not split sites, because we already have split sites. I guess part of the inquiry could be knowing that we are in the policy framework of consolidated sites. We did some analysis to pick this site and there's a sort of cost benefit perhaps embedded in that data and analysis that could be brought forward, not necessarily now on the fly, but for council members. And in addition to that, maybe some cost comparison analysis could emerge from that data.
Chair Reich and Councilmember Fletcher, to provide just a bit more rounding out to that, consolidation, which we are doing in a number of areas in Public Works, will allow us to save time in travel, environmentally, the reduction of vehicle miles traveled, and will allow us to reduce the number of resources we need to serve multiple divisions at one time, therefore saving money.
Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to make a comment, which is I think this was very helpful in helping remind us about, not taking for granted that our city has the ability to provide clean water to our residents and to surrounding residents and other communities. Very recently, a couple of cities have had to issue orders for their residents to boil their water before consumption. Major cities, Austin, Texas was one. And of course, we all know about issues of lead poisoning in water systems. And so I just want to state the obvious, which is that providing clean water to our residents and businesses is a very important core function of the city that we must take very seriously as elected officials, ensuring the safety of our constituents, our residents, and those who rely on our city for water. I also want to say that as we look out even 10 years, we are anticipating significantly more flooding from climate change. We are planning for that. But again, it just sort of reemphasizes the need for us to be ready to operate at a high level of capacity for dealing with flooding and our water system repairs. And that will damage property. I know more and more council members will start to hear from constituents as floods increase and property damage results. Those two statements said, I wanted to come back to a couple of things that we discussed last term around this decision. One is, could you, or perhaps Property Services or Finance, talk about the site where the water yard exists today and what the future for that site will be, and sort of the timelines around that site?
Mr. Chair, Council President, the existing water yard site is designated to become a new fire station. That's where will be relocated from in northeast Minneapolis. This is Fire Station 11, if I remember correctly. That is in our long-term capital funding plan. That fire station, like other facilities, is aged and in need of replacement. It'll be a better location for service as well. So as soon as that site is vacated, then we will be moving forward with the construction of that fire station with net debt bonds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions per the operation? I will note that we did get a significant update. I think there was in a previous presentation contemplating different departments maybe using it. Clearly, that's not part of the operation now. It's pretty much your facility. Plus, the training does invite potentially Park and Rec insofar as they have workforces with similar skill needs. So that would be the significant update from the previous one. Any further commentary from Director Hutchinson in closing? Oh, sure. Yeah, Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate being recognized. So first of all, I just want to welcome the community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to learn about your local government and what your taxpayer dollars are doing for you or on you. So I want to speak briefly to Councilmember Fletcher's comments because I think it's important to unpack a little bit of the narrative around this project to have more clarity about what the main issue really is here. And so I think we've been able to see that no one is opposed to having the city continue to provide essential functions to residents in nearby cities on this issue. No one is saying the city should not have a new facility. No one is saying public works employees don't deserve a dignified place to work and a living wage. That's not really the issue. We've been working on this project, or at least I have been working on this project for the last 5 years. This is my 5th year on the council. The presentation here outlined thinking and plans and decisions that have been taking place since 1991 and likely prior to that. That concerns me in many ways because in the last cycle, many of us saw how disengaged local elected officials were from their communities, and we've been seeing the work that we've been trying to improve as an institution to ensure that multilingual communities are informed, that immigrant community members are present when we're trying to make decisions that impact them and their families. We've been trying to ensure that residents are really engaged on the comp plan, and we've been growing and learning and getting better at that. I get scared thinking about what that process was like back in 1991 and how many folks didn't know what their communities were being planned for. And so bringing that conversation to today, to 2018, I don't expect council members to immediately become experts on this issue and to understand what those 5 years worth of work has been about. And so the comment about, this is such an environmental injustice and let's move it to north, no one is saying move it to north. There are other council members who do not represent the South Side, who represent other parts of the city that have been engaging on this topic. That's not a bad thing. I welcome that input. I welcome that engagement. No specific direction has been given on that specific issue, but no one's ramming this project out anybody's throat. I mean, that is what I felt has been done to the Ninth Ward, but that's certainly not what I want to do to other council members. So that's not the way we should color this conversation. And on the topic of environmental justice, the reason why this discussion is so complicated is because it is in an overburdened community that has been, that currently faces and shoulders a lot of the impact of two major industrial polluters in our neighborhood that are nestled by the Greenway and that are very close in proximity to our city's first light rail line, the Blue Line. And it's an area that should be touted as a transit-oriented development project for community benefits. And so the question is, how are we defining community benefits? Because we can say clean water is a community benefit. We can say delivering on the Winona LaDuke dream is a community benefit. And so we as elected officials will have to define what that community benefit is and then align our decisions to that. So putting the issues of narrative aside and the history and who was involved or wasn't involved in a 1991 decision, I do have two specific questions for staff and perhaps the chair of the committee. So yesterday, when the committee chair and I had a chance to check in on this, there was a comment about how some community questions had come forward when community met with the chairman yesterday, and that the staff would be ready to answer those questions today. I'd like to hear what those questions were and hear a response to them. I don't personally have a copy of all those questions, and I'm not sure if they were emailed to staff or if they were emailed to somebody else, but it would be great to have a response to those questions that came out from yesterday's meeting on this project, preparing for today. And then my second question is, over the last probably 2 years, we've seen, we meaning staff, myself, community members, at large public meetings that included hundreds of people, have seen multiple visuals where there would be a public works facility expansion coupled with a community space. And I didn't see any of that information today, and so it feels a little disjointed that I've been carrying out this message in the community saying, hey guys, we can make this an awesome shared project, let's figure it out, let's work together, and then I get here today and none of that is being presented. And so I'm not quite sure who's being bamboozled, if it's like me, if it's the community, if it's both of us, or what's going on. So it would be great just to have information from staff about why those visuals weren't presented today, what's the plan, what was the approach, what was the analysis, because I'm really just confused right now about the lack of integration in the multiple public meetings that I've hosted with staff on this issue and not seeing the integration of that framework in any of this information that we were presented with today.
Just broadly speaking, in terms of process, there was a thought from the Home Committee, and the Home Committee is the reporting department, which is Finance and Facilities, as that's their jurisdiction. The chair had brought to my attention that there's many aspects that are not germane to his committee per se, and that he asked, could we break up the conversation? And I said, well, if we stick within our swim lane, so to speak, from a committee perspective, we could have an informational update, which actually was overdue in terms of the operational aspect. So today is really the operational aspect. There's oftentimes more than one aspect to a project, particularly a large, complicated one. And the other aspects, broadly speaking, would be facility, finance, location, and then, of course, within community engagement, there's that notion of community benefit, economic development, community revitalization. More of that would be from the CPED aspect, because they are the people in the department that delivers on that aspect of it. And I think those are the areas where, within the framework of facility operations, can the space accommodate other opportunities for community redevelopment? And of course, if the answer to that is yes, or potentially, then that would become a CPED. A whole series of CPED processes get kicked into place. Requests for qualifications, property dispensation policies kick in, all kinds of things. But those are different conversations for different committees. I wanted to make sure that there was an update, a fact-driven update from staff. What are you proposing to do? Is it different from earlier proposals? We found out that there are some significant differences, but at the core, it's still the same operation. In terms of questions that were asked, it was, some of it I think was covered. I do not have a sophisticated system. I just jot things down and then relay them to people directly. But it was about clarification, department-wide needs within a broader context, not just the operation of this, and I think that was touched on. Perhaps that can be expatiated. The efficient use of what is needed and what can be done at the site, I think that was touched on. Perhaps that could be expanded as well. Obviously, was there an element of consultant information in terms of analysis? I think it was touched on, but more could be derived from that area. Community feedback, I think you expressed how you've been engaging with the community. Building analysis and reuse came up, and growth of the water division, I think, was touched on. That was a question. Do we expect maybe that could be more drilled on in terms of growth of the department? Will this be a facility that would accommodate more people, and at what rate? Traffic was touched on, particularly traffic on 26th and 28th in terms of traffic analysis. I'm sure there is some level of analysis done, but I also know there's subsequent analysis done when you actually have an actual site per the site plan review, because right now we're at the high concept level. When it does become an actual site plan review, that would be one of the documents and findings that would be presented at that time. And actually the design would be informed by said more detailed information on it. But you do have a rough idea of going in and out based on our own activities. And again, the activity is the conversation we're having today, the activities as proposed and the why of the department. And then the last thing would be, pollution impacts and how they can be mitigated or not. And I think you touched on that. But again, anything can be expatiated on and may not be the best to do here, but it could be done offline through the community process. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, this is consistent with our conversation yesterday, which I relayed to Lisa Cerny, who built additional information into our presentation to be as responsive as we could to questions that have been arising. I do believe we've covered information about the traffic impacts and mitigations, about the additional analysis to do everything we could to reduce Public Works footprint on the site, about the benefits of consolidating Public Works facilities, multiple facilities in general, the benefits to that. I will admit there is one question that we have not provided an answer to that you have noted that I did hear from you again, which is about the structure itself. And to be as responsive as possible to those who took the time to come today, I believe that we could answer questions, that particular question, with assistance from our partners in property services. So I believe that Bob Friddle has been closest to the conversation surrounding the structure, and I'll ask Bob to provide a brief comment.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it should be noted that that aspect of the conversation will be fully vetted in the home committee, but we can touch on it here as it does relate to operations on the edge of the conversation.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I'm Bob Friddle. I'm Director of Facilities Design and Construction in Property Services Division of Finance and Property Services. And in that capacity, I've worked closely with Public Works and other city leadership, NCR and CPED on this project from my start 4 years ago in this division. With regard to the existing building and the existing property, the former Roof Depot property, our division has commissioned a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental study with a company called Braun Intertech, who are very familiar with that neighborhood, having done work previously on the Hiawatha site and also in the adjacent clinic site at the corner of 28th and Hiawatha that was built recently. And that site was an EPA Superfund site that was environmentally remediated as a part of that project. So in our analysis of the Roof Depot property, which was purchased at a market rate, we determined a cost estimate of roughly $2.5 million for cleanup of that property, both the building and the site. And our Phase 2 environmental study has been, as well as the Phase 1, has been made available to the community online at the Public Works site. And so since the purchase of that property, it has been shut down. The boiler that heated that property was a major environmental impact, and we shut down the heat in that property and drained the water. There have since been some roof water leaks that have introduced water inside the building and created some mold conditions that will have to be taken care of. But there is existing asbestos within the building and lead-based paint that will have to be remediated prior to any demolition of that building. The site's been identified to have some deposits of chemicals, and all of that is laid out in the Phase 2 study. And so the plan would be to commission a response action plan from our consultants at Braun Intertech that would be under the auspices of Minnesota Pollution Control Agency requirements. It would be reviewed by them and approved by them. It would then be bid out to licensed abatement contractors who would go through the building and abate anything that they found. It would also be monitored, that work, on the building and site would be monitored throughout by an independent testing agency. They would test any suspicious material that was found and determine how it should be handled properly. So in a situation like this, the building is ventilated negatively so that anything that's disturbed inside the building does not leave the building. So there's a negative pressure created inside the building. Any products like asbestos are bagged on site and then transported safely within the site area. Ground that's removed from there is wetted prior to removal to minimize any dust and keep it on the site until it's bagged properly. If need be, it's treated on site. So.
I appreciate that, and as exciting as facilities management and property management is, we'll reserve more of that for the appropriate committee. We had a lot of information that was operational, and I think by splitting out the conversation, I think it's a better way to manage the different aspects of the project. So I appreciate that background, but I think we will reserve that for the subsequent meeting, and you can give your full presentation at that time. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you. So I just wanted to then go back to the questions the community had yesterday were incorporated by staff into the presentation. Later I'll hear how that information was received by community. And then on the point of the shared community space visuals that we've been workshopping out in the neighborhood and trying to get support for, you're saying that those were not included here today because, can you explain the thinking around that? And will there be a time for the council to see those or weigh in on those?
Yes, to the latter part of your inquiry, yes. And the thinking was is that this should be, if we're going to split it out, Public Works really can't speak to economic redevelopment debates, siting debates. It's just not their jurisdiction. And so I really wanted them to speak to what they have jurisdiction over, which is the operation, and to give an operational update. I think it's in the public interest to make sure that if things change significantly from the last update, that we should have a public forum for that. And so I just wanted to keep it very specific to the department that's going to be speaking today, to that which they can speak to.
I just wanted to clarify that CPED has not been involved in all of the community discussions we've been having with folks about the potential shared space designs. And so I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding how we're going to pull them in at the last minute on this. But I did want to acknowledge that, the entities or the departments that have been leading these discussions in the community with me around shared space and what's possible have been Public Works and then the financial officer's office. And the staff direction that we authorized maybe 2 or 3 years ago on this project, directing staff to identify how much share space could be granted to community redevelopment purposes, it did kind of, put that rationale together, and it did make that direction. So it's interesting that we're doing this now, but I guess I would have wanted CPED involved earlier in the process if that's what I would have heard from staff. But so far, it's been, explained by Public Works and the Chief Financial Officer multiple times with community, and never has anyone said we should get community planning and economic development involved. So I'm just feeling a little disjointed in strategy because for the last 2 years it's been me, Public Works, and the Chief Financial Officer out there engaging community on this topic. And I'm not opposed to CPED being a part of it at all. I just feel like if we have had multiple meetings about this issue in the neighborhoods on this, I don't see why that wasn't included today. I mean, I just don't really understand the rationale for that. Maybe I don't agree with it.
Well, the department can speak for itself because I believe that they were trying to express what they need for the site. And the interface point is really between, yes, the jurisdiction is finance, and they've been leading the conversation, obviously, to contextualize why they're making this investment. The main tenant obviously had to be part and parcel of those conversations. But the policy pivot actually goes from finance and property and how that gets managed and dispensed with and the public funds that are underlying that with any economic redevelopment. Economic redevelopment would only get in place once there is a project identified and the site has been secured for such use. So I guess it's a sequencing thing, but Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Kano, I understand your question. To the question about CPED, they've been on our team from the very beginning and had participated in the GAC meetings and subsequent meetings. And we have asked David Frank to be here today because we have been working very closely with him, because as Public Works, we need to seek advice from our experts and other departments who can help the conversation. So they have been very, very much on a part of our team. I might also make a point of clarification that the staff direction that you noted asks for Finance and Property Services to return to the Ways and Means Committee. And so that conversation that you're seeking about the staff direction says something to the effect of return to the Ways and Means Committee to report back on whether and how much property may be made available. And so to stay true to that staff direction, that discussion is still going to be occurring at Ways and Means. However, our report focused more on what did we do to reduce our overall footprint. That then informs the next conversation about that will be the report back on the initial staff direction.
Thank you. I do understand that we're expected to go back to the Ways and Means Committee, because I was here as a policymaker when that was approved. My statement is about disagreeing, about not including all of the community-based designs that we have been workshopping out there with folks here in this conversation today. So that was a tactical mistake, I believe.
Noted. Councilmember Gordon.
Thanks, I appreciate that we're having some discussion here. I'm a little bit confused about what we can actually ask, and I think we were just asking about the space and the acreage, so I guess I'm curious about what is the minimum. Well, first of all, I've been on the council for a long time and I followed this process. I would really like to see a win-win. I understand why Public Works and why the previous councils and the current council wants to consolidate things at this site. I worked really hard on making sure that the current building is LEED certified. Getting the asphalt plant moved out of there was this big accomplishment, and it was really great. And having the arsenic site there and the triangle that was in so many yards of my constituents and residents and neighborhood, and also the neighboring ones, was this big issue that we had to address. So I've been following and tracking this for a long time, and I'm hopeful that we can find a win-win out of this situation. I'm seeing it as a lot of contention, and there's a lot of challenge to getting to that win-win. This isn't a soft and easy landing along this whole process, and I know that we're trying now to accomplish that somehow. And haven't been as engaged and involved in it in terms of what's been going on the site right now and what's happening. I do know from what I've been following is that there seems to be some issue about how much space is going to be available for who. And so did we come up in your report, did you tell us how much acreage that we think the city functions will require? Or did you just say we're going to have to wait and we don't get to hear that till Ways and Means?
Director Hutchinson.
I can, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I can give a preview of what you may see at Ways and Means. That in working with the community, the team's initial proposal was 0.8 acres. We listened very closely, and we understood that felt insufficient. We took almost a year to scrub down the operation, to count every single fleet vehicle, to look at every possible way that we could fit all of the functions that you just heard about into the minimum space possible. Through diligent work on the part of consultants, the architect, finance and property services, some help from planning and public works, we were able to double that to about 1.5 that could be made available. That comes with some trade-offs that you'll hear more about that are more financial and only a little bit operational in nature. That is a topic for Ways and Means. But that there is a preview of both the process by which we have followed, as well as a little bit about space.
Okay, and is the 1.5 acres, is that seen as a great compromise that's welcomed by all stakeholders? Or is that still creating problems?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I believe, it's hard to
Maybe
speak
that's,
for,
yeah.
I think you probably know the answer to that already. I think the community is hopeful for more.
Okay, and then I have another question, and I don't know if this is for property services maybe. Is the intention that we were then going to sell extra property to somebody, and we're going to put it out on the market for fair market value, or is there a plan for how we're going to just deal with if we have extra land that we're not going to use for public works? And maybe David Frank can answer this
I
question.
think the question then goes to, how does CPED deal with land that the public owns with public dollars?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I heard my name being called. If the council decides that some land on property that we the city owns should be made available for a private use, which is to say not the city's own use, then we have council-adopted procedures, which would entail CPED, Community Planning and Economic Development, making that property available. We would typically do that through a competitive request for proposals process, in which we would seek community-supported development objectives. In this case, some of that work has already taken place, but we would be looking to the council in this special situation for guidance on the process and on timing and on whether we're seeking highest and best use and the most money possible or some other permutation. So there's a discussion to be had. But in a more abstract answer to your question, Councilmember Gordon, if the entire site were not needed for city operations, CPED would be charged with coming up with development objectives, working with the community, and then putting out a competitive request for proposals in which we would seek a developer to do to fulfill those objectives.
Okay, thank you. That's good to get that summary of the standard process. And I guess that kind of dumps it back in the council's lap to figure out what we'd want to do with that. And it sounds like we would have a bit of discretion in terms of what we think the value would be and what would be, a responsive to the RFP.
And again, I don't want to delve too much into finance. They can explain this in their committee as it's germane to their topic area. But that some discretion, this is uniquely tethered in terms of the money source for the acquisition in the first place. But again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that, as that will be fully explored in the subsequent
Yeah, we
committee.
heard
Otherwise,
about
we're
that a
really
little
here to
bit
one.
with the navigation center. I recall that.
Yeah, correct. Thank you. Any further conversation? This is a receive and file. I will move to receive and file the item as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries. And thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the conversation.